Picture a frozen fjord in Norway, year 950 AD. A Viking longship cuts through icy waters, returning from a brutal raid in England. 30 warriors sit at the oars, their blonde hair braided with silver rings, their beards woven with intricate pattern. They're singing war songs, drinking mead, and doing something that would shock modern viewers. 2 warriors embrace passionately after surviving a battle. A jarl runs his fingers through another warrior's hair, praising his bravery with words that sound like love confession. Young warriors hold hands while walking through the village, and historians have been arguing for centuries about what this actually means. Comment below right now. What's your first reaction to seeing warriors acting this way? Because what I'm about to reveal has been hidden in plain sight for over 1,000 years, and the truth will blow your mind. This isn't just about history. This is about a secret that could change everything you think you know about masculinity, warrior culture, and what really happened in those Viking longhouses during the long Nordic winters. Stay until the end, because the final revelation will shock you. Let me tell you the story of Egil Skallagrimsson, one of history's most documented Viking warriors, whose life holds clues to the truth that historians have been desperately trying to understand. The warrior who confused everyone. Egil Skallagrimsson was born in Iceland in 910 AD. Historical sagas describe him as the most fearsome warrior of his generation. He killed his first man at age 7 during a ball game, smashing the boy's skull with an axe when he lost. He fought in over 50 battles and was feared across Scandinavia for his berserker raid. But here's where it gets interesting. This same ultra-violent warrior also wrote explicit love poetry about his male companion, not subtle poetry, direct declarations of emotional and physical desire. He openly wept when his male friends died. He braided flowers into his hair for festivals. He wore elaborate jewelry and makeup. He kissed male companions in greeting, and these weren't quick, friendly pecks. So what was really going on? Keep watching, because each piece of evidence gets more shocking. Tell me in the comments, what do you think is happening here? Drop your theory before I reveal the truth, the evidence that made historians sweat. Let's look at what we actually know from historical records, because the evidence is extensive and undeniable. Multiple sources document behaviors that seem impossible to explain. First, the physical contact. The Arab diplomat Ahmad ibn Fadlan encountered Vikings in 922 AD and wrote detailed observations that his Islamic audience found shocking. I have never seen people so free with physical affection between men. They share beds, not from necessity, but from choice. They bathe together, washing each other's bodies with a tenderness I have only seen between lovers. They embrace and kiss without shame, in full view of others, and no one questions it. Second, the words they use. Viking sagas are filled with descriptions that sound explicitly romantic. The saga of Gisli describes the relationship between Gisli and his companion Vestine. They loved each other with a passion that exceeded all understanding. When apart, neither could find peace. When together, they spoke words of love that made women jealous of their devotion. The saga of Njal describes 2 male warriors. They were as one soul in 2 bodies, sharing everything, hiding nothing, loving completely. The text goes on to describe them sleeping in the same bed every night, making all decisions together, and defending each other's honor above all else. Third, the physical evidence. Archaeological discoveries keep adding to the mystery. Viking graves across Scandinavia contain male warriors buried together in positions that archaeologists describe as intimate, bodies facing each other, arms embraced, sometimes even mouth to mouth. What does this mean? Hold that question, because it gets even more intense. The grooming obsession that raises question. Here's something that makes the mystery deeper. Viking men were obsessed with their appearance in ways that seem shocking for supposedly brutal warrior. Archaeological evidence shows that combs are found in virtually every male Viking grave. often as the most treasured possession. But not just combs. Tweezers for plucking facial hair, ear cleaners, nail files, and even cosmetic accessories. Vikings wore eyeliner made from crushed minerals. They dyed their beards in elaborate patterns using imported dyes. They wore intricate jewelry, not just functional pieces but decorative arm rings, neck torques, and even earrings. They braided their hair in complex styles that took hours to create, and they did this for each other. Contemporary accounts describe Viking warriors sitting for hours while companions braided their hair, decorated their beards, and applied cosmetics. The level of intimacy and care involved in these grooming sessions was remarkable. One Anglo-Saxon chronicler wrote with clear confusion, "The Norsemen are more concerned with their appearance than any woman I have known. They preen and paint themselves, and take great pleasure in decorating each other's bodies. I cannot understand men who fight like demons but beautify themselves like maidens." So what was really happening? The next piece of evidence is even more provocative. Comment below. Are you starting to form a theory? Because we're about to go deeper. The rituals that historians can't explain. Vikings had formal ceremonies between male warriors that have left historians arguing for centuries. These rituals were legally recognized, binding, and performed publicly. The ritual worked like this. 2 warriors would cut themselves, mix their blood in the earth beneath a strip of raised turf, and swear oaths to each other before the gods. From that moment, they were bound in what Vikings called sworn brotherhood. But here's what makes it controversial. The sagas describe these ceremonies using language that sounds exactly like marriage vows. In the Gisla saga, the sworn brotherhood oath includes, "I bind myself to you, body and soul, in this life and the next. What is mine is yours. What hurts you hurts me. I will love you until the gods themselves fall." After these ceremonies, the 2 warriors had legal rights to each other that exceeded marriage. They shared property, they shared beds, they shared everything. If one died, the other was obligated to support his family, but also to never marry his widow, because he was already considered bound to his sworn brother's memory. The saga of the sworn brothers describes what happened after the ceremony. They went to the sleeping quarters together, and from that night forward, no one saw one without the other. They shared a bed, shared their food from the same bowl, and spoke to each other in whispers that no one else could hear. Were these marriages, sexual relationships, something else entirely? Keep watching, because the truth is not what you think. The poetry that made everyone uncomfortable. Now, let's talk about something that really bothered Christian monks who recorded these sagas. The explicit love poetry Vikings wrote to and about each other. Egil Skallagrimsson, that berserker warrior I mentioned, wrote this about his companion Arnbjorn. "You are the fire in my winter, the light in my darkness. When I see your face, my heart beats as it does before battle. Your touch brings me peace no woman has given. I love you beyond reason, beyond honor, beyond even my love of gold and glory." Another poem from the Havamal tradition includes, "Better to die in battle beside the man you love than to live long years without him. A warrior's greatest treasure is not silver or land, but the companion who shares his bed and his fate." The poems get even more explicit. Some describe physical desire in terms that leave little to interpretation. Christian monks who copied these texts often added notes like, "Here the pagan poet speaks of unnatural affection," or "These words are not fit for Christian ears." But Vikings didn't hide these poems. They recited them publicly at feasts. They carved them in runes on memorial stones. They celebrated them as the highest form of poetry. What does all this evidence add up to? Stay with me, because we're getting close to the truth. The sexual practices that divided historians. Here's where we need to talk directly about sex, because the historical evidence is clear that Vikings had sexual relationships between men. This is documented in multiple sources, and not seriously disputed by historians. But here's the mystery. Vikings also had harsh sexual insults and would literally kill you for certain accusation. Being called arger or ergi was grounds for legal murder. These terms related to sexual behavior between men, but in a specific way that historians have struggled to understand. Vikings would kill you for suggesting they were ergi, but they also bragged about sexual conquests of male enemies. They wrote love poems to male friends. They slept in the same beds. They had legally binding ceremonies that looked like marriages. How do all these contradictory facts fit together? The answer requires understanding something fundamental that almost everyone gets wrong: the graves that keep revealing secrets. Archaeological evidence keeps adding to the mystery. Let me describe some specific discoveries that have caused major debates. The Oseberg ship burial contains 2 women buried with weapons, treasure, and sacrificed animals. DNA analysis proved both were high-status individuals, buried as equals in one of history's most elaborate Viking funerals. Their bodies were positioned intimately. Multiple graves across Scandinavia show male warriors buried together, bodies intertwined, sometimes with grave goods that suggest they shared lives, not just deaths. One grave in Sweden contains 2 men, one with his arms wrapped around the other from behind, positioned exactly like lovers sleeping. A burial in Denmark contains 2 male warriors with their hands clasped together, buried with matching weapons and matching jewelry, including what appear to be wedding rings, though that term didn't exist in Viking culture. What were these relationships? The evidence suggests something profound, but the truth is more complex than simple modern category. Keep watching. We're almost to the revelation. The Christian confusion. Here's something crucial. Almost everything we know about Vikings was written by Christian monks 200-300 years after the Viking Age ended. These monks were operating under Christian sexual morality, and they were clearly confused and disturbed by what they were recording. You can see it in their notes. When describing close male relationships, monks would add comments like, "Here the pagans practiced affection that defied natural law," or "These warriors shared bonds that decent Christians cannot speak of openly." The monks had a problem. They wanted to record Viking history, but they didn't have language or concepts to explain what they were seeing. Were these men lovers, friends, something their Christian worldview couldn't comprehend? They filtered everything through Christian assumption, which means we're reading Viking culture through a distorted lens. The real Viking culture was probably even more intense than what survived in the Christian edited text. Now, after all this evidence, after all these mysteries, let me reveal the truth that historians have finally started to understand. The truth that changes everything. So, here's what was actually happening. Were Vikings gay? The answer is, that question doesn't make sense. Vikings didn't have concepts of gay or straight. They didn't categorize people by who they were attracted to. They had a completely different system for understanding sexuality, relationships, and masculinity that cannot be translated into modern terms. Here's the truth. Vikings cared about dominance, not gender. Sexuality was primarily about power dynamics. A Viking man could have sex with another man, and it wasn't considered shameful or strange as long as he was the dominant, penetrative partner. The shame term ergi didn't mean has sex with men. It meant is sexually passive, receptive. Huge difference. The warrior who penetrated another man was considered more masculine, not less. He was asserting dominance. Using conquered enemies sexually was proof of superior masculinity. The shame was entirely on the receptive partner. This is why Vikings could simultaneously write love poetry to male friends, have formal ceremonies binding them to male companions, share beds and physical intimacy, kill anyone who suggested they were sexually passive, brag about sexual dominance over male enemies. These aren't contradictions in Viking logic. They're all expressions of the same value system based on dominance hierarchies. But it goes deeper than just sex. Vikings believed that true masculine strength required deep emotional bonds between men. The sworn brotherhood ceremonies, the love poetry, the physical affection. These weren't about sexual orientation. They were about creating bonds so strong that men would die for each other without hesitation. A Viking warrior needed a battle companion he loved more than life itself. That love made him a better fighter because he fought to protect his companion, not just himself. The love between sworn brothers was considered the highest form of masculine bond, more important than marriage, more binding than family, more sacred than any other relation. Was it sexual sometimes? Probably. Was it always sexual? Probably not. But Vikings didn't care about that distinction. They cared about loyalty, honor, shared fate, and willingness to die together. The grooming and aesthetic practices weren't about attraction. They were about honor and respect. Taking care of your appearance showed you respected yourself and your companion. Having your battle brother braid your hair before a raid was intimate, but it was warrior intimacy, preparing each other for possible death. Modern people look at all this and try to categorize it. That's gay, or that's just friendship. Vikings would be confused by both labels. They had no concept of sexual orientation as identity. They had warriors who dominated and warriors who submitted. They had brothers bound by blood oaths and shared fate. They had men who loved each other in ways that don't fit modern categories. So, were Vikings gay? No. Were they straight? Also no. They were Vikings, operating in a cultural system so different from ours that our categories are useless. Here's the real shock. Vikings were simultaneously more comfortable with male physical and emotional intimacy than modern people, and more violent about sexual hierarchy. They could write love poetry to their battle companion, then rape a conquered enemy to assert dominance, and see no contradiction. Modern people are either homophobic, condemning all male intimacy, or progressive, celebrating it as LGBTQ+ identity. Vikings were neither. They had a third option that modern people can barely imagine: complete comfort with male intimacy within a rigid dominance hierarchy. The warriors buried together weren't necessarily lovers in the modern sense. They were sworn brothers whose bond was considered more important than sexual categorization. The love poetry wasn't necessarily expressing sexual desire. It was expressing total devotion to your battle companion. The shared beds and physical affection weren't about orientation. They were about the bonds that made Viking warriors unbeatable. Comment below if your mind is blown by how different their entire worldview was. What this reveals about modern culture. The reason people ask, were Vikings gay, reveals more about us than about Viking. We're obsessed with sexual categorization. We need everyone to be gay, straight, or bisexual. We can't comprehend relationships or intimacy that exist outside sexual categories. Vikings prove that masculinity can look completely different than modern American masculinity. Modern men often can't hug too long, can't say "I love you" to male friends, can't cry, can't be too concerned with appearance. All these restrictions supposedly protect masculinity. But Vikings, the most feared warriors in European history, did all these feminine things while conquering half of Europe. They wrote poetry, braided flowers in their hair, wore makeup, expressed intense love for male companions, and nobody questioned their masculinity because they proved it through action. Modern masculinity seems fragile in comparison. It requires constant performance and restriction. Viking masculinity was secure because it was proven through deeds, not restricted expression. The final answer. So, to definitively answer the question, Vikings weren't gay in any sense that word means today. They had some sexual contact between men, But it wasn't about sexual orientation. It was about dominance, power, and warrior bonds. They had deep emotional and physical intimacy between men, but it wasn't romance in the modern sense. It was sworn brotherhood, battle companionship, and bonds forged in shared violence. They cared about appearance and aesthetics, but it wasn't about attraction or vanity. It was about honor, respect, and warrior pride. Everything that makes modern people think that's gay meant something completely different in Viking culture. We're projecting modern categories onto a society that thought about masculinity, sexuality, and relationships in fundamentally different ways. The real lesson: masculinity is culturally constructed. There's no single natural way for men to behave. Vikings created a version of masculinity that was brutally violent and emotionally open, dominant in combat, and comfortable with male intimacy, concerned with appearance and unconcerned with modern sexual categories. Were they more enlightened? No. They were still violent, hierarchical, and harsh, but they weren't afraid of male closeness, and they didn't see emotional intimacy as threatening to masculine identity. Maybe modern men have something to learn from that. Not the violence or the sexual hierarchy, but the emotional freedom to love your male friends openly, to care about your appearance without shame, to cry when your brother died, to write poetry about the men who stand beside you in life's battles. Vikings conquered Europe while doing all the things modern culture says makes you less of a man. Maybe they knew something we've forgotten. If this video shattered your assumptions about history and masculinity, share it with 3 friends who need their minds blown. Subscribe for more historical revelations that challenge everything you think you know. Next video: why Roman soldiers held hand. The truth about ancient masculinity. The saga ends. Your understanding begins. Now you know the truth about Viking warriors that historians debated for centuries. They weren't gay. They weren't straight. They were something modern language can't even describe. And that's exactly the point.